Hidden in the dense forests of northern Alabama, where mist clings to the valleys like secrets to a family name, there exists a place known to locals as Pine Hollow. Largely untouched by the progress that swept across America in the post-war era of the 1950s, this isolated pocket of civilization remained. Here, nestled between rocky outcrops and hidden from main thoroughfares, generations of the Blackwood family established roots as deep and tangled as the ancient oaks surrounding their homesteads. It was 1957, when Drive Thomas Harrison, a young physician newly assigned to the county health department, first encountered the Blackwoods. Fresh from medical school with idealistic notions of rural healthcare, Dr. Harrison had volunteered for assignment in Walker County. His first visit to Pine Hollow was prompted by reports that had reached the Department of Children with unusual medical conditions. The Blackwoods keep to themselves, warned Nurse Margaret Fletcher, a local who had reluctantly agreed to guide him. Been that way for generations. The whole hollow is practically one family, if you understand my meaning. Dr. Harrison did understand, though his medical training had only briefly touched on the genetic implications of consanguinity. What he witnessed in Pine Hollow would eventually shed light on one of rural America's most hidden health crises and become the focus of his life's work. The rutted dirt road ended at a cluster of small wooden houses, some little more than cabins arranged in a loose circle. While children played in the yards, adults eyed the health department vehicle with suspicion. Something unusual Harrison noticed immediately. Several children exhibited similar physical characteristics, unusually shaped skulls, malformed limbs, and distinctive facial features. Samuel Blackwood, the family patriarch, a stern man in his 60s with calloused hands and penetrating blue eyes, greeted them at the central house. He reluctantly allowed the doctor inside after Nurse Fletcher's careful introduction. "We take care of our own, doctor," Samuel stated firmly. "Always have. Don't need outsiders poking and prodding." Harrison replied, "I'm here to help, Mr. Blackwood. The county sent me because there were concerns about some health issues among the children." Samuel's weathered face remained impassive. "Our ways go back generations. My grandfather settled this hollow after the Civil War. His children married their cousins because that's all there was. We've continued because it keeps the land in the family, keeps our ways pure." As Harrison conducted basic examinations of the children, he documented concerning patterns: 3 children with polydactyly, 2 adolescents with severe intellectual disabilities, and several younger children with distinctive facial anomalies. Most troubling was 4-year-old Eliza, who exhibited signs of a progressive neurological condition. "She started having tremors at 2, explained Mary Blackwood, Eliza's mother and Samuel's granddaughter. "Now she can barely walk, and the seizures come almost daily." The worry in Mary's eyes betrayed the stoic facade. What Harrison couldn't know then was that Eliza suffered from a rare recessive genetic disorder, Blackwood disease, as it would later be documented. The condition, characterized by progressive neurological degeneration, would claim her life before her 8th birthday, as it had claimed others in the family before her. The patterns observed that day were the visible manifestations of generations of inbreeding. The Blackwood family tree, which he would painstakingly document, revealed multiple instances of first-cousin marriages, and in 2 cases, unions between uncle and niece. The isolated geography of Pine Hollow, combined with strong social taboos against marrying outsiders, had created a genetic island where recessive disorders flourished. As Harrison prepared to leave that first day, Samuel Blackwood fixed him with an intense stare. "Doctor, we know our children aren't always right, but they're ours, and we love them. Whatever you think of our ways, remember that." That evening, back in his modest office, Harrison began what would become an extensive case file. His medical training told him that the conditions he observed were likely the result of recessive genetic mutations being expressed when identical defective genes were inherited from both parents. Yet, his education hadn't prepared him for the human reality of these genetic consequences. Over the next months, Harrison would document 17 distinct hereditary conditions among the extended Blackwood clan. The family's isolation meant these conditions had gone largely undiagnosed and untreated, with folk remedies and resignation serving as the primary responses. But the Blackwoods were far from unique. As Harrison expanded his research, he discovered similar patterns in other isolated communities across the state's mountainous regions. The combination of geographical isolation, poverty, limited education, and strong cultural traditions had created numerous genetic islands with similarly devastating health consequences. If you're not already subscribed to this channel, please check. The shocking revelations of these hidden genetic tragedies will change your understanding of rural America forever. The spring of 1958 brought both renewal to the Alabama countryside and deeper insight into the genetic tragedy. Dr. Thomas Harrison had spent the winter months researching hereditary disorders and consulting with genetic specialists. What you're describing fits patterns we're seeing in several isolated communities, confirmed Dr. Eleanor Wright. The Walker County cases appear particularly severe due to the multigenerational nature of the consanguinity. Armed with new knowledge, Harrison returned to Pine Hollow with a more systematic approach. The Blackwoods, initially resistant, had grown more cooperative after Harrison arranged medical treatment for several family members. On this visit, Harrison brought a photographer to document physical symptoms and a laboratory technician to collect blood samples. The medical team meticulously recorded physical measurements, symptoms, and family relationships. The most striking case was that of the Jensen brothers, Richard and Michael, cousins to the Blackwoods. Both boys exhibited a distinctive form of progressive blindness that began with night blindness. Their mother, Ellen Jensen née Blackwood, had married her second cousin. It started with Richard when he was about 5, Ellen explained. He kept bumping into things at dusk. We thought he was being careless until Michael started showing the same problems. Harrison recognized the symptoms as consistent with retinitis pigmentosa. In his notes, he wrote, "The Jensen case represents a classic example of autosomal recessive inheritance." What made the Pine Hollow situation particularly tragic was the clustering of multiple rare conditions within a single extended family. Beyond the neurological disorder and retinal degeneration, Harrison documented cases of congenital heart defects, skeletal malformations, metabolic disorders, and intellectual disabilities. Samuel Blackwood, despite his initial resistance, gradually became a valuable ally. The family patriarch's sharp memory provided crucial historical information. "My grandfather's first family almost all died young," Samuel recounted. He blamed it on the war and hard times, but they had the shaking sickness like little Eliza. His second wife was from outside the hollow, and those children lived longer. But when the marriages turned back inward, the sicknesses returned. This pattern of genetic refreshing followed by reversion to consanguinity was common. Harrison's research extended beyond Pine Hollow to other isolated communities. In the mining town of Coville, he documented a cluster of families with hereditary hemolytic anemia. In the settlement of Red Hill, he found multiple cases of a distinctive form of dwarfism. Each community had its own genetic signature, a unique set of disorders reflecting its particular founding population. By late 1958, Harrison had compiled enough data to publish his initial findings. His paper documented 27 distinct genetic conditions across 5 communities. The medical establishment's reaction was mixed. Some colleagues dismissed Harrison's concerns as overstated. Others recognized the public health implications but questioned whether intervention was appropriate. Dr. Wright became Harrison's strongest ally. Together, they secured a small research grant. "What we're seeing in Alabama isn't unique," Wright noted. "Similar patterns exist throughout Appalachia. The difference is that Dr. Harrison has documented these cases systematically." The human impact of these genetic disorders extended beyond physical symptoms. Many affected families faced social stigma and economic hardship. "The other children call them bat boys because they can't see in the dim light," Ellen Jensen confided. The teacher didn't know how to help them. This social dimension became increasingly central to Harrison's work. Meanwhile, medical science was advancing rapidly. The structure of DNA had been discovered just a few years earlier, opening new frontiers. In his journal, Harrison wrote, "The tragedy of these communities is that much suffering could be prevented with basic genetic counseling and education." As 1958 drew to a close, Harrison's work had documented the medical consequences more thoroughly than any previous study. Yet, he increasingly recognized that addressing the issue required sensitive engagement with deeply held cultural practices. The Blackwood family story had become a window into a hidden aspect of rural American life. The patterns of disease would eventually contribute to a broader understanding of genetic inheritance and inform more culturally sensitive approaches to public health. Summer heat hung heavy over Pine Hollow in July 1959, matching the weight of the decisions facing the extended Blackwood family. 2 years into Dr. Harrison's study, the community had begun to grapple with the implications of his findings. Young Eliza's condition had deteriorated rapidly. "She doesn't recognize me anymore," Mary Blackwood confessed, her voice breaking. The neurological disorder had reached its terminal stage. Samuel Blackwood, who had initially resisted, now sat silently on the porch. "Doctor," he finally said, "I need to understand exactly how our family ways are causing this suffering. Not in your medical terms, but in plain language." This request marked a turning point. Harrison arranged a community gathering at the small Baptist church. Using simple hand-drawn diagrams, he explained the basics of genetic inheritance. "Think of it like this," Harrison explained. "Each of us carries some damaged instructions. When we marry someone from outside our family tree, their different set of instructions usually makes up for our damaged ones. But when cousins marry, they often carry the same damaged instructions, and their children have no healthy backup." The silence in the church was profound. Then Rebecca Blackwood, who had buried 3 children, stood up. "I've given 3 babies back to God," she said. "If what you're saying is true, doctor, then William and I caused their suffering." Harrison recognized the delicate balance required. "The children's condition wasn't your fault, Rebecca. You and William couldn't have known. But now that we do know, future generations have choices." The discussion continued for hours. A collective understanding began to emerge. For the younger generation, this knowledge presented immediate dilemmas. Daniel Blackwood, Samuel's 19-year-old grandson, approached Harrison privately. "Sarah and I have been planning to marry next spring," he confided. "Are we doomed to the same heartache?" Harrison couldn't offer certainty. "The closer the blood relationship, the higher the risk," Harrison explained. This scientific reality collided with deep-rooted social practices. The economic dimension further complicated matters. Samuel Blackwood articulated this concern. "Doctor, I understand your science, but these young people can't just drive to the city and find different spouses. This land is all we have." This tension between medical advice and socio-economic reality characterized similar communities. Harrison's expanding research had identified numerous genetic islands. In the coal mining community of Morgan Creek, he documented a family with hereditary progressive nerve degeneration. In Cedar Junction, he found a cluster of families with a distinctive congenital heart defect. These communities shared common elements: physical isolation, economic hardship, limited access to education, and strong cultural traditions. Harrison's work increasingly addressed these social determinants. He developed educational programs that acknowledged the economic and cultural contexts. The approach proved more effective than direct condemnation. By late 1959, Harrison noted encouraging changes. Young people, when provided with both medical information and practical alternatives, increasingly sought partners from neighboring communities. Families began organizing social gatherings with other settlements. For older generations, however, the new understanding brought a different kind of pain. Samuel Blackwood, who had arranged numerous cousin marriages, carried this burden heavily. "I did what my father taught me was right," he told Harrison. "Never imagined I was passing down sickness." Eliza died in August 1959, just shy of her 6th birthday. Her funeral brought together the entire extended family. Harrison, invited to attend, observed the beginning of a community transformation. In his research journal, Harrison noted, "The Blackwood family stands at a crossroads. Their response to tragedy offers hope. The price of isolation had been measured in children's lives. But from that painful accounting came the possibility of a different future, one that honored family connections while recognizing the biological necessity of genetic diversity. By early 1960, Dr. Harrison's research had expanded significantly, encompassing 12 isolated communities. He had established a systematic approach. Winter rains had made Pine Hollow nearly inaccessible, but Harrison maintained contact through weekly radio calls. The news that reached him reflected both progress and ongoing challenges. Daniel Blackwood had postponed his marriage to cousin Sarah, instead finding work in Birmingham. 2 other young couples had followed similar paths. Yet economic necessity had forced several families deeper into the hollow. Harrison's expanded research revealed distinct patterns. In areas where mining or manufacturing provided employment options, young people increasingly broke the cycle of consanguinity. In purely agricultural communities, consanguineous marriages remained common. The medical consequences were starkly evident. Communities with higher rates of cousin marriages consistently showed higher prevalence of recessive genetic disorders. The Blackwood family's distinctive neurological disorder was just one example of what geneticists would later term founder effects. Harrison's collaboration with Dr. Eleanor Wright led to more sophisticated analysis. "What we're seeing is classic Mendelian inheritance," Dr. Wright explained. The genetic disorders documented represented a wide spectrum. In Pine Hollow, beyond the neurological disorder, Harrison identified cases of polydactyly, congenital heart defects, metabolic disorders, and progressive vision loss. In the mining community of Coville, he documented a high prevalence of Ellis-Van Creveld syndrome. In the farming settlement of Mayfield, Harrison found multiple cases of a rare blood disorder. The human impact extended beyond medical symptoms to profound social effects. Affected families often faced stigma. "The church ladies bring food," said Martha Jenkins, "but I see how they look at her like she's punishment." These social dimensions became increasingly central to Harrison's work. Working with local clergy and teachers, he developed educational materials that addressed harmful myths. The scientific understanding of genetics was itself evolving rapidly. In his case notes, Harrison reflected on this evolving understanding. The tragedy is that this knowledge remains largely confined to academic circles. This gap between scientific knowledge and community practice represented Harrison's greatest challenge. Effective intervention required addressing the underlying social and economic factors. Harrison's approach evolved accordingly. He focused on creating broader social connections between isolated communities. The Community Connections Program, launched in spring 1960, organized monthly social events. Samuel Blackwood, whose initial skepticism had given way to cautious support, offered the Pine Hollow Schoolhouse. The event drew families from 3 neighboring communities. Progress was measured in individual decisions. When Ruth Blackwood began courting James Mercer from neighboring Bell Creek, it represented one small step. When Daniel Blackwood returned from Birmingham with a non-related fiancée, it signaled a more significant break. Yet, economic realities continued to exert powerful counterpressure. Young women, constrained by economic dependency and stricter social expectations, had fewer options. Harrison's research increasingly highlighted these structural factors. In a presentation to state public health officials, he argued that addressing rural genetic disorders required economic development as much as medical intervention. The pattern of consanguinity we observe is not simply a cultural preference. It's often an economic necessity. This perspective represented a significant evolution in Harrison's approach. By mid-1960, Harrison's research had documented 143 cases of genetic disorders across 12 communities. This work constituted the most comprehensive study of consanguinity effects in the rural American South. For the families involved, the most immediate impact came from the gradual normalization of reaching beyond family circles for marriage partners. Autumn colors painted the hills surrounding Pine Hollow as Dr. Harrison made what would be his final research visit in October 1962. His groundbreaking study was drawing to a close. The changes he observed offered both encouragement and sobering perspective. Samuel Blackwood greeted Harrison with unexpected news. Daniel's wife had their baby last month. A healthy boy. They named him Thomas after you. This small personal victory symbolized the progress Harrison had documented. His research now encompassed 218 families in 17 rural settlements. The resulting publication would become a foundational text. The transformation in Pine Hollow reflected broader changes. Of 16 marriages involving Blackwood descendants since the study began, 9 had been to partners from outside the immediate family circle. The Community Connections program had expanded significantly. Yet challenges remained. Economic pressures continued to limit options, particularly for young women. The medical consequences of past consanguinity also continued to manifest. During his final visit, Harrison examined 3 new cases of genetic disorders. Rebecca Blackwood, who had lost 3 children, now served as an informal community health educator. "I tell them that marrying cousins is like planting the same crop in a field year after year," she explained. "Our family needs new blood just like fields need rotation." This agricultural metaphor had proven effective. Harrison had incorporated similar culturally appropriate messaging. The broader impact of Harrison's research extended beyond the specific communities. His work had drawn attention to genetic disorders as a public health issue. At the state level, this awareness had led to modest but significant policy changes. The Alabama Department of Public Health had incorporated basic genetic counseling into its rural health programs. The University Medical Center had established a specialized clinic. Yet, these institutional responses remained inadequate. As Harrison noted in his final report, the medical consequences of consanguinity represent a significant but largely unaddressed public health challenge. On his final evening in Pine Hollow, the community gathered at the Baptist church for a farewell dinner. Families brought dishes reflecting the simple but hearty cuisine. Children he had examined as infants now ran and played among the pews. Samuel Blackwood, speaking for the community, presented Harrison with a hand-carved walking stick. "You came here as a stranger asking questions we didn't want to answer," the patriarch acknowledged. "You leave as a friend who helped us see what we couldn't see for ourselves." The gesture moved Harrison deeply. In his journal that night, he reflected, "The Blackwood family's willingness to examine their traditions represents a profound form of courage. This story is not one of ignorance overcome by education, but of a community finding ways to preserve its identity while adapting to new knowledge." This nuanced perspective had come to define Harrison's approach. The genetic disorders he documented were not simply medical phenomena, but manifestations of historical, economic, and cultural forces. As Harrison prepared to leave, Rebecca Blackwood shared a confidence that captured this complexity. "Dr. Harrison, I sometimes wonder if our ways were wrong all along or if they were right for their time and just outlived their purpose. My grandparents married cousins because it kept the family strong when everything else was uncertain. Maybe our job now is to find new ways to keep that strength without the suffering." This insight echoed what Harrison had observed, a gradual, uneven transition. The legacy of past consanguinity would continue to manifest for generations. Yet Harrison's research had helped break the cycle of ignorance. In December 1962, Harrison presented his complete findings. His documentation of 37 distinct genetic disorders represented groundbreaking work. More significantly, his analysis of the social, economic, and cultural factors offered a framework for intervention. The Blackwood family and other communities became reference points in the developing field of community genetics. The Blackwood-type neurological disorder would eventually be mapped to a specific genetic mutation. For the families themselves, the study's most meaningful impact came through changed marriage patterns. By 1970, a follow-up assessment would document significant declines in consanguinity rates with corresponding decreases in the incidence of recessive genetic disorders. Samuel Blackwood did not live to see this full transformation. He passed away in 1966, having witnessed the birth of 5 great-grandchildren free from the genetic disorders. His family continued to inhabit Pine Hollow, but with increasing connections to the broader genetic pool. Dr. Thomas Harrison's study stands as a landmark contribution. Beyond its scientific significance, it represents a compassionate engagement with communities navigating the challenging intersection of tradition and modern medical knowledge. The story of the Blackwood family reveals how deeply human genetic health is embedded in social context. It also demonstrates how communities can adapt their traditions when provided with knowledge and options. As we've traveled through this dark chapter, we've witnessed how isolation and tradition combined to create genetic tragedy and how knowledge and connection offered a path forward. If you followed this journey to its conclusion, please leave a comment saying, "I watched till the end." Don't forget to subscribe to see more hidden American histories. Like and share this video to help others discover these forgotten stories that still have much to teach us today.